We are finally back to normal on the Whiskey Noobs podcast, whatever normal is around here. And so I am very excited to dig into your guys' questions. And then we're going to get back to rolling with those episodes with guests and with little fun experiments and all that fun stuff. Now, what do I mean we're getting back to normal? Well, what I mean by that is for the past month and a half, I have had a lot of things going on and a lot of travel, which I briefly mentioned in the canceled episode where I just kind of posted a quick little, hey, this is what's going on. And luckily, we're through that hump. And also, of course, in the middle of all that, I was starting up my new podcast that I co-host, the Perfect Pairing podcast. And so there's been a lot of chaos. And so I had to kind of just crank out some rapid fire episodes. I appreciate you guys for sticking with me through it. And we're through that little bit of a rough patch and we are into smooth sailing moving forward, hopefully. So that being said, this is a Q&A episode, so I'm going to answer your guys' questions that you have submitted to me. You can submit your questions every Wednesday on my Instagram page. I post a sticker to my story, and then you can click on it. You can add your question, and then I select some of the questions to have on the show. Or you can jump to the front of the line by joining the Patreon, and if you join that Patreon page, then you can submit your questions through there. Okay. I think that's the majority of my announcements. I do have some patrons to shout out, so let me look them up real quick. I also want to mention at the beginning of this episode, let me do that before I get to the patrons. Tickets for the Kentucky Bourbon Festival are going on sale here soon, and I will be there again this year. So if you are interested in the Kentucky Bourbon Festival, I did a full review of it on this podcast. That was episode number 127, everything you need to know about the Kentucky Bourbon Festival. I ran through my experience there, and yes, I will be going back, so I just want to let you guys know tickets are going on sale if you're interested in going. I don't make any money if you buy tickets to it. I just want to let you know because I do truly think that it's a fun experience. I thought it was awesome. I had a blast, and I hope to see you guys there. Don't be afraid to say something if you see me there, by the way. I've mentioned it before, but, I'd love to talk to you guys. It's one of the best parts of being there. Okay, that being said, let's move on, and let's shout out our new expert noobs. These are folks who join the expert noobs tier of the Patreon page, and when you do that, you get a shout out. So I need to look up who it was because I get these mixed up a lot. So if I ever miss your shout out, please let me know. It's so hard to keep track of people who have joined, people who have not joined, or people who have left, things like that. Okay. In fact, one of these I may have already shouted out, but I want to shout out Juan Moya and Blake Powell for joining the Expert Noobs tier of the Patreon page. Thank you guys so much for joining that page. It means so much. The support is huge. It's tremendous, and I just can't say thank you enough. The Patreon page has funded some stuff that people have asked about in this Q&A and that we're going to be talking about. All right, I promise those are the announcements for this episode. You can stop hitting your skip button. And let's get back to normal. So speaking of normal, I always do a mystery whiskey tasting in these episodes. I don't know if you can see this marker, so I'm throwing it out of the camera's view. I always do mystery whiskey tastings in these episodes, and I haven't been able to for a while, mainly because of dry January, but then all that other stuff. So let's do a mystery whiskey tasting. I'm changing it up this time around because it used to be something that was on the show, and now we've had so many episodes that, I could say, the last 5 episodes, but then I feel like that's not enough options, so I changed my mind. I'm going to pick a few, now that I have these nice cameras, and show them. The side camera here sees these bottles, and I'll read them off for those of you just listening to the audio version. That way you can try to guess which of these, this is 4 of them, which of the 4 I am drinking. So today we've got Smooth Ambler's Contradiction, Maker's Mark, Evan Williams Bottled and Bond, and Wild Turkey 101. One of those is in this glass. I'm going to give it a quick nose and a quick tasting, give you guys some notes, and then by the end of the episode, you get to try to guess which one it is. It's kind of like a blind tasting, except I'm doing the tasting. I think it's fun. Hopefully you do too. Cheers. Let's do this thing. Right off the bat, there's a nice oak with some vanilla, a little bit of maybe an orange zest, and kind of like a dusty, almost mildewy, but not in a bad way, flavor. Maybe that's a little bit specific, but actually I think there's a couple of these that fit that bill. So try narrowing that down as we go. I think it's fun. Once again, for those listening to the audio version, you've got Smooth Ambler Contradiction, Maker's Mark, Evan Williams Bottled and Bond, and Wild Turkey 101. All right, let's dig into some of these questions. We've only got a few long form ones today. I think I'm not good at answering in short form, is what I'm trying to say. The lightning round doesn't go well. I always get too talkative. So I might just make all of these in between short form and long form. But there are 3 of them this week that I want to spend a little bit more time talking about. So let's get into that. Question number 1. We've got the episode with Doug Price of the Agave Social Club turned me on to tequila. Have you or are you planning to try more tequilas? Let me read that again since I fumbled it. Have you or are you planning to try more tequilas? All right. So, the episode with Doug, let me tell you guys what number it was. Was it seriously that long ago? Episode number 104, Tequila versus Mezcal versus Whiskey with the Agave Social Club, is what this person is talking about. Now, I picked out this question for a couple of reasons. First of all, Doug at the Agave Social Club is a fantastic person. You should go give him a follow if you are interested in tequila, mezcal, learning more about those spirits. I'm not trying to just give my followers away to Doug because he's that good. He has that good of content, but I still do think you should go follow him. So, you know what? If some of you guys go listen to him instead, I understand. He's a fantastic human being. Although I prefer you stick around and listen to both of us. But I wanted to make sure I said that because talking with Doug has been great. We have both gone back and forth, bounced ideas off of each other, that sort of a thing. We have a really good working relationship, and he has been the opposite of a gatekeeper. He's never been like, oh, I learned this secret, so I'm not going to tell you about it. We both kind of go back and forth with stuff like that, and we try not to hold it from each other, which has been fantastic. So can't recommend him enough, and his content is amazing. His camera quality, his production value is amazing. I can't recommend his content enough, especially if you're trying to learn more about tequila and mezcal. Now, the second half of that question is, yes, I am trying to learn more about tequila and mezcal. So I am going to be doing a lot more digging into that type of stuff and hopefully bringing you guys content about it. By the time this comes out, I might have a video out about those things, about probably just tequila so far. But I do want to dig more and more into it and try more stuff and make some videos about multiple different spirits. I'm still going to keep it mostly whiskey based because that's obviously my forte. But I think it'd be fun to try other spirits, especially blind tastings, things like that, on the social media and maybe on here. This will probably be mostly whiskey based though. Maybe we'll get some other spirits into the mix. So those were the 2 important things I wanted to say about that. But for those of you who don't know, tequila and mezcal are both agave-based spirits, and they're a little bit different. There's a couple of regional differences. If you go listen to that episode 104 with Doug, we walk through that a little bit more. But in general, they're both agave-based, so they have somewhat similar flavors, and I really want to branch out and try some of those flavors moving forward. And with that, I wanted to mention I'm open to recommendations. So if any of you guys out there are into tequila and mezcal and you've been into them for a while and you've got some favorites, please let me know. Throw them on the Discord specifically. That's the best way for you to recommend something and me to see it. There is a Discord that's just open to everybody. There's also a Discord that is specifically for the patrons. So go ahead and throw it into one of those, and I would be happy to see your guys' recommendations as I continue to try to learn more about it myself. Okay, next long form question we've got, is this a new podcast that you started? Yes. So this person is asking about the Perfect Pairing podcast. It is a new podcast that I co-host, and my co-host is Adam Gard from Dreamer Cigars. He runs, I think it's actually the biggest cigar social media platform in the world, if I'm not mistaken. Fantastic at what he does. I also had him on the show. Don't know that episode off the top of my head either, to be honest with you. But he runs a fantastic platform all about cigars, very similar to Whiskey Noobs, but centered around cigars. And so we are working together on a new podcast called the Perfect Pairing Podcast, where, as the name suggests, we walk through pairings. So we do 3 different pairings each episode with 1 cigar, because smoking 3 cigars in an episode would be brutal. So we do 1 cigar per episode, 3 different pairings. Usually those pairings are whiskey. Sometimes we throw in fun stuff like coffee, or the episode might not be out yet, but we have an episode coming up with root beer. different things that just have different flavors and pair differently with the cigars. But most of the time, it's whiskey cigar pairings. And it's been a ton of fun. I can tell you right now, we have had a blast making this so far. Right away, we were like, this is enjoyable. This is a good time. And so we have been enjoying it a lot. And so I highly recommend you go listen to it, is I guess what I'm getting at. But if you're not into that, that's totally okay. But I know a lot of you guys ask me about cigar and whiskey pairings. Oh, and the second half of that I don't want to forget to mention is we do take all of the cigars. So you might know how I do the email list for this podcast, where you can sign up and I tell you the whiskeys in advance so that you can go out and buy them. Well, I can't really ship you guys whiskey legally. There's not a great way for me to do that. So that's why I do the email list. For that podcast, however, we do actually group together the cigars that we're going to smoke on it, and there is a subscription service that you can get, and all those cigars are going to be sent to you. Now, I don't handle all that logistics. That's all on Adam's side, but he groups those all together into a bundle, sends them out, and then you can smoke right alongside us with that show. So that's called the Perfect Pairing Club that you can sign up for, and you can use discount code PPP10 to sign up for that, and you'll get a little bit of a discount as well. And then that also, it's good for the numbers because it helps us to know who comes from the podcast versus who is just joining the subscription to have the subscription. So use that code, you get a discount. We get some statistics to know where you guys are coming from. And I highly recommend it. I think it's a lot of fun, and I think people are going to enjoy it. I hope you are. If not, hey, let me know in that Discord, as we talked about. So that's the new podcast. Now, let's talk about this next question, because I have been wanting to kind of dig into this topic a little bit, which is why I made this a long form question. This person asks, I'm moving to the Columbus area this summer. Any recommendations for local or Ohio whiskey or distilleries? So if you're moving to the Columbus area, you are moving to a good area for whiskey, because there's multiple distilleries in that area that I really like, and I've had a lot of them on the show before. So the first distillery from the Columbus area that I would recommend would be Watershed. I don't know if I've actually reviewed. No, I'm almost positive I had their fall finish series on the show, because it's a really good holiday whiskey. And that is the Watershed bourbon finished in Nocino barrels. So I'm pretty sure I've had that on the show. Watershed does a lot of fun things like that, especially with their finishing series. So I can't speak too much to their normal bourbon. I think I've had their normal bourbon once a while ago, and then I also have a bottle of their bourbon, but it's a barrel pick, so it's like got a specific flavor to it. So aside from that, I can't speak to their normal bourbon very much, but I've had their finished stuff as well, and it's very good. So, usually a finish can't just cover up a horribly ugly whiskey. If it's an ugly whiskey, it's going to have an ugly finish. They have great finishes, so I'm assuming their whiskey's pretty great, and the barrel pick of theirs that I've had is also great. The other big one that I want to mention, I wanted to look up some more Columbus distillers so I don't forget about any of them. But the other big one that I wanted to mention was Middle West Spirits. They're down there by Columbus, and I typically love their stuff, especially their bourbon. I mean, actually, they have a really good rye as well, and they have a couple of really good offerings. I also just recently had their wheat whiskey on the show and tasted that. And their bourbon specifically has done really well for me in blind tastings, like to an extent that it caught my attention, and I was like, this is really awesome. I can't believe it took me this long to realize how much I liked this bourbon. So for that reason, I'm a very big fan of them. I love when a bourbon, or any whiskey really, that I hadn't previously spent too much time thinking about does really well in blind tastings. That's just, to me, very exciting, because it's like, wow, I hadn't caught on to it before. Now I know about it. That's great. The other big one that I wanted to mention was High Bank. I haven't had their stuff, so I can't specifically speak to it, but I've heard great things about High Bank. So that's all I can really say about it. I don't know them well enough to know if their stuff's very good. I do want to buy some of it, but it is higher end stuff. At least a lot of their stuff near me is higher end. So I haven't had the chance to do it yet. I do want to buy some of it. Actually, like, as I'm saying this, I'm like, oh yeah, I was going to buy a bottle a while ago and I never did. So High Bank's the third one that I want to mention. There's more. I mean, there's a lot down in the Columbus area that's really good. So you're moving into a good area, because it's just far enough away from the Bourbon Trail that, like, it's not the Bourbon Trail. Columbus is probably 3 hours away from, like, Louisville area, Kentucky, I think. And so you're far enough away that you're not like in it, because the Bourbon Trail is huge. There's distilleries hours apart from each other on it. You're far enough away that you're not really in that, but you're close enough that there's still a pretty good whiskey culture. And I don't know if that's why, but there's definitely multiple distilleries down there that are doing really cool things. So overall, I highly recommend those few Columbus distilleries. All right, now that takes us through all of our long form questions, even though, these next ones are going to be long-ish form probably. But I do want to take a break because I want to taste this whiskey one more time and give you guys a couple more notes. Let's go. I'll be honest, I forgot how tasty this is. There's some vanilla, there's a little bit more fruit, and aside from all those other things I already mentioned, there's a little bit of a bitterness as well, a little bit of a bite. Kind of, especially at the end, it kind of sticks around on your tongue in the finish. And that is all that I'm going to say about that. All right, moving on to our lightning round questions. Some of them will be more lightning than others. I'll just warn you right now. Okay. What are your goals inside of whiskey? I'm assuming you mean like in the world of whiskey. What are my goals? I guess the easiest thing to say is to continue to grow and to continue to bring you guys new content. I would love to be able to produce more content than I'm currently producing, to have a little bit more time. I'm working on redistributing or delegating different things so that I can spend more time on content creation. I would love to do that. I'd love to have maybe another podcast or something like that, like outside of this and the Perfect Pairing podcast. I've had some ideas for some other ones. And then I would love to be more involved with a brand, or I don't want to get involved with any one specific brand though, because I don't want people to think I'm just like biased towards that brand. But I would love to, if we're going with like a dream, I would love to come out with my own whiskey. I think that'd be fantastic. I don't know if that's feasible or not, but I think that would be really cool. There's other things, like other projects that have been in the background for a while that I can't really talk about yet, but I would really love to make those a reality so that you guys are able to check them out, because I think they're going to be very cool. Hopefully I can give you more info on those soon. Yeah, I don't know. I want to come out with not just products, but just like, I want to change some of the culture around whiskey a little bit. How do I put this without sounding conceited? I'm trying to think of like the best way. Okay, let me put it this way. I've been doing these skits on TikTok and on Instagram. You might have seen them. And the idea behind most of them is to convey a few different things, to overcome some of the scarier parts of whiskey, to try to show that it's actually not as intimidating as people think it is. And then also to really show and really value the more wholesome aspects of the whiskey culture, the camaraderie and the bonding that happens when you have a glass of whiskey with folks, and just the overall, the parts of whiskey that people like. I really want to help showcase that and try to, when I say shift the culture, I don't mean like I'm going to change the world of whiskey. I guess I more mean the culture outside of whiskey. I want people to understand what this is and what you and I experience with friends and through the podcast and at places like KBF. I want to show that through those skits. And I also, just through all of the content that I do, want to try to help with that, help break down the stereotypes that we're snobs or that it's intimidating, that whiskey drinkers are going to make fun of you, stuff like that, and really dig into those more wholesome, like camaraderie aspects of it. So that's one goal that I didn't know that I had until I just said it out loud right now. So thanks, because I just discovered that. And then, of course, anybody in the whiskey industry, I think there's very few people who you could say, who are doing what I'm doing, and you could say, do you want to own a brand? And they'd be like, no. Now, we might not want the stress that comes with owning a brand, that's for sure. But I do think it would be interesting. I just don't know if it's ever in the cards for me or not. That's more along the lines of like a dream, less than a goal. But thank you for the question. That whole thing about the skits and the shifting of the culture, I might not have said out loud if you hadn't asked that question. So thank you. Okay, one must go. Bourbon, rye whiskey, Irish whiskey, or Scotch? That's really hard. I I would say either Irish whiskey or Scotch because they're similar enough. People always yell at me when I say they're similar. Compared to bourbon versus Scotch, Irish whiskey and Scotch are somewhat more similar. Um, so I don't really know. Right now I have more Scotch, although you didn't say anything about American single malts, so I could still have American single malts if I got rid of Scotch. Ooh, maybe I would do that because American single malts is heating up. It's getting pretty big industry. Okay, next question. Getting married next week, and I wanted to give him a bottle to celebrate. Any suggestions? So I saw this one. I was really excited to answer it because my suggestion is anything you get him is going to probably be awesome as long as it's not like a terrible bottle. The reason I say that is because on my wedding day, I did have a couple of special bottles, and I still think of those bottles as just being fantastic, amazing, just because with that experience, they were. And they're good bottles of whiskey, but the sentimentality behind it makes it so much better. So if you just buy him a nice bottle of whiskey, especially if you know anything that he's into, just buy him that. He's probably going to love it because it's going to go with that day from now on. Every time he has it, he's going to be taken back to the wedding day. And so you can't, I don't want to say you can't go wrong, but if you get him something good, you can't go wrong. So I don't know what your price range is, but if you're in like the $50 range, if you want something sweet, go Angel's Envy. If you want something bourbony, go Woodford Double Oaked. It's a double oaked whiskey, and it has a lot of oaky flavor to it, which I really like. If you want something more expensive, I did Jack Daniel's Gold, but that's because I like Jack Daniel's, and my dad and I both like Jack Daniel's, so we picked that out. And so one of the reasons that it's sentimentally, I loved it. Something else in the $100 range. Angel's Envy, rum finish, the rye whiskey. That's around $100. Let me look at my whiskeys over here. Noah's Mill's not $100, but it's a little bit more expensive. It's really nice for a bourbon. Yeah, I don't know. I would anything that's good and in your price range, and you've seen recommended before, he's probably going to love it because it's going to be his wedding whiskey for the rest of his life. He's going to remember that. I love that question, though. That's a great question. Moving right along here, we've got, does whiskey go bad if it's opened and sitting on my shelf? How long till it goes bad? In general, yes. However, if it's like more than halfway full, it's going to take a really long time to go bad. Also, go bad, I mean, you'd have to, I don't even know if it could ever go bad enough to harm you. I don't know for sure. But it definitely takes a super duper duper long time if that's the case. So by go bad, I just mean that the flavor is degrading. If it's less than halfway full, I would say the general rule of thumb, I think, is between 6 months and 2 years. The lower you get, the higher the ratio of air to whiskey in the bottle, the less time that you have. So once they get down to that quarter, fifth of a bottle left, fifth is a little confusing, but I mean like 1/5 of the bottle left, not a fifth, if that makes sense. 1/5 of the liquid in the bottle left, quarter of the liquid left, then you don't have a lot of time. So then I would try to drink it in the next couple of months, if not sooner. I'm really bad at this, and you'll see bottles that violate that rule on my shelf, and I need to get better at it. And I don't even have an excuse. That's just, I'm really bad about it. I'm like, oh, I don't want to get rid of it, but, it's going to go bad. So, but aside from that, what I should say is if you're more than halfway, if you're 3/4 or more than that full, you've got a very long time before you're even going to taste any difference. I've done side-by-side tastings. I did it on an episode of this podcast, and it took a long time for me to notice the difference between the few-month-old bottle and the brand new bottle. Now, I did have a bottle that didn't have very much left in it and was very old with not very much left in it, and that one I could tell. So it probably went 6 months with 1/7 of the bottle in there or something like that. So then it's going to go bad. But most of the time, people just consider it like it doesn't go bad because you can just let it sit on your shelf for a long time, especially if it's mostly full. Next question. Have I ever tried Mallow whiskey? It's a marshmallow flavored bourbon. No, I have not, but I did screenshot that because that sounds very interesting and I would like to try it. Next question. Frank Sinatra was buried with a bottle of Jack Daniels. What would be your choice? Oh my goodness. Well, I have a few bottles behind me, and so I have no idea. I don't know if I would get buried with a bottle of whiskey because then nobody would ever get to drink it. Yeah. You know what I would rather do? I would rather have a bottle of whiskey. If I ever do have my own brand, it'd be my own brand. If not, let's say it's either my most recent barrel pick, like at the time that I die, or my first ever barrel pick, one of the two. I would rather somebody have that, and then at the funeral, everybody who enjoys whiskey gets a glass of it. I think that would be more fun. Let's say my first ever barrel pick, that was Blue Note Juke Joint. I would rather have a bottle of that, and everybody who enjoys whiskey gets to have a little glass and be like, hey, Chris picked this out before he died a super long time ago, hopefully, because if it's not a super long time ago, that'd be bad for me. Okay, moving on. Top 3 genres of music. Oh, boy. This has changed for me a lot throughout my life. So here's a full confession. I don't know if I've ever said this on the podcast before. In high school, I was very much into Eminem's music. And I know that I don't look or sound like the type of person that you would think would be into Eminem's music. And by that, I don't mean anything against folks who listen to Eminem, because I was big into Eminem. I mean that I was a nerd in high school, and I'm listening to songs about, like, fighting people and whatnot. So, yeah, you know, it's kind of strange, but I also do still enjoy Eminem's music sometimes. So I don't know if that would be my top 3 nowadays, but when I say I was a fan, I should really be clear here. I was a fan. I would venture to say there's probably like a 60 to 70% chance, maybe even 80, that if you just say any Eminem song, I will know, and like give me those first couple of words, because that helps kickstart the memory. I'll know almost every word in the song. That is how serious I am about it. And that's not a flex, because once again, didn't fit my personality, but there's a little bit about me you guys didn't ask for. Okay. So yeah, Chris thought he was I don't know, a badass, I guess, back in the day. But nowadays, so I did get into a super long country music phase. I still listen to country quite a bit. Been big into Zach Bryan's most recent album. I really liked that album. So maybe that new type of country music. I think there's a genre for it, but I don't know the name of it. But you know what I mean, like that kind of Zach Bryan, Tyler Childers, kind of Chris Stapleton-y. I don't know if Chris goes into that category or not, but those types of music. I'm a big fan of that right now. Definitely classic rock. I don't know the names of most of the songs, but I know the songs for 2 reasons. 1, I grew up listening to it, so like all my dad listened to. And 2, I now have a super duper long classic rock playlist that somebody else put together. I just found it on Spotify. And so I listen to it, and I don't like read the names of the songs or who's singing them. I just listen to them. So big fan of classic rock. I should probably like read the titles of the songs. Third genre. What would my third genre of music be? I think I'll throw in metal just for lifting, because I listen to a lot of like metal music when I'm lifting weights. So maybe that would be my third genre for that reason. Great question, and a little bit of bonus information about me that you did not look for or ask for. Next question. All the Benchmarks are fantastic in price and taste. Am I wrong? They're talking about Benchmark from the Buffalo Trace Distillery. And I don't disagree with you. I haven't had all of them, so I can't speak to all of them. But I do think the normal run-of-the-mill Benchmark is good, and it's like $11. So, like, it's not amazing. It's not like the best budget bourbon in the whole wide world, but it's $11, I think. At least it used to be. And then you've also got Benchmark Foolproof, which I currently have, which I love it. I will go buy, I want to go buy another bottle, actually, next time I see it, because it's so good, and it's like $26. I stand by the fact that I think that is one of the more underpriced bourbons, and I hope I don't just make it allocated by saying that, or make it, I guess, more rare by saying that. But I really enjoy Benchmark Foolproof. And then I think I have another Benchmark. It might be Single Barrel, but I don't remember. But it's good as well. I mean, I think they're solid. I don't think you can really go wrong with them. But so far, the Foolproof is the one that I was the most impressed with. Next question. I'm still not getting certain notes well, even chewing the whiskey. Tips. So one tip is just to keep at it. It's one of those things that takes practice. The next tip is, of course, blind tastings or just side-by-side tastings if you can't do them blind. But if you can get somebody to scramble those whiskeys for you, do them blind. start with two things that are very different, like a bourbon and a scotch, and then kind of work your way closer to each other. By far, that is my favorite way to develop your palate. I mean, you guys, especially those who have been here since day one, you've seen my palate progress. I did not start off with the palate that I have nowadays. Not that I'm like some amazing person nowadays, but I went through tons and tons of side-by-sides, and then I started getting into blinds, and like throughout all of that, I've really gotten better at tasting whiskey than I used to be. So that is my favorite tip, is to do side-by-side tastings or blinds if you can have somebody mix them up for you. And then just really focus on those notes, and focus on the nose. Here's another bonus tip. Focus on the nose, but try to, when you taste it, taste the thing that you were smelling in the nose, because a lot of times it's easier to smell the flavors than it is to taste them. So if you can smell them really well on the nose, then try to pull out those same notes when you get to the palate. And then later on, when you get really good at it, then you want to kind of do the opposite. You want to say, okay, this is the nose, this is the palate, this is the finish. This is kind of where they overlap, like a Venn diagram. But in the beginning, it's kind of helpful to look for notes on the nose and then find them on the palate. Okay, next question. Did you get a new camera with the haircut? Quality of video is up. Hey, first of all, thank you very much. And I appreciate so much that somebody is noticing. Because, yeah, actually, I did. Like, it didn't come with the haircut. But I have been working on my cameras. New cameras for the podcast. So 2 new cameras for the podcast. And then also a new camera that I do all my short form content on, which is this guy right here. Not an ad, not sponsored, just got the new Galaxy S24 Ultra, and I got it specifically because I knew I wanted to make content, and the camera's pretty phenomenal on it. I have zero relation to Samsung, but the phone's pretty stellar, and clearly people are noticing. So thank you for noticing that. I also got that new camera that I mentioned before. It's the DJI Osmo Pocket 3, super long name. And I've used it a couple times, but it's mainly going to be more for traveling stuff. But also been working with that. So I've really been trying to up the camera game and the production value of my videos. So I appreciate that somebody noticed. So thank you for that. Next question. Can you please explain the subtle taste differences between bourbon and rye whiskeys? In general, I'll try to do this quickly. Bourbons are going to be sweeter. They're going to typically, for me, have more of an oak to them, more of a brown sugar and dark sweet flavors like that. Rye whiskeys are typically going to have more of a spice, which might be like a baking spice, might be like a strong cinnamon with a hint of cracked pepper, that sort of a thing. Or it might be more of an herbal spice. It might be like the spices that you would cook with, like Italian herbs, some dill, some pine. Depends on the rye, because rye is a very versatile grain. You can get really different flavors from it. And I think I actually talked about that. If it wasn't, I think it was just the last episode that I talked about that. I talked about all the different grains, so you can go back to that episode and listen to kind of just an overview of what the different grains bring to the different whiskeys. All right, moving on. My favorite coffee order. I may have mentioned this before. There's a local place, if you're ever in the Stark County, Ohio area, called Tremont Coffee, and I love their coffee. And so my favorite coffee order is from there. Ooh, almost dropped my phone. It's from there, and it's called a Morning Moonshine, and it's delicious. Is there any bottle that you don't want to open till that right moment? So I want to say no to this because I'm like, oh, I'm not a hoarder. I open my bottles. There's one exception to this rule, and I'm a hypocrite because I say you should open your bottles and you should try them. But the bottle that I dipped at Maker's Mark, I feel like that's an acceptable exception to have because I dipped it myself. I don't know when I'm going to open it. There's not like a special occasion that I'm looking for to open it, but I do love Maker's Mark's stave profiles. I haven't had this one before, but I picked out one of their special distillery-only stave profiles, which is like blends, not blends, but they do different finishes, and some of them they only sell at the distillery. I picked out one of them. I dipped that, and I have no idea when I'm going to open it. So I need to pick out an occasion. I need to just do it. So I'm sorry that I'm a hypocrite, and I hope you guys can forgive me. But I mean, I feel like that's an acceptable answer, right? Okay, moving on. Can you review Ben Holiday Soft Red Wheat? I would love to review that. I'm going to save this screenshot because I do want to review it. I don't know if it's available near me or not, but if not, I'm going to have to try to find a way to get my hands on it because I've seen people talk about it. It apparently is really good. I want to give it a try. All right. How do you like 13th Colony? I am from California and have not seen it out here. I'm not sure where 13th Colony is available at, but I do really like it. There's been some controversy that they were misleading folks with the way they were sourcing their whiskey, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm not in tune with that controversy at all. But at least as to the quality of the whiskey in the bottle, I thought it was really good, especially their bourbon. And then I've recently had their double oaked, and I thought that was fantastic as well. So, big fan. I can't speak to the controversy, but I can speak to the whiskey itself. Bourbon versus Scotch. Personal experience, I find bourbon harsh and Scotch to have more flavor. Okay, this is a good question because this is a great example of how different people have different palates. So, is bourbon more harsh than Scotch? Yes, to some people, and no to others. Scotch has a smoother, usually kind of a more creamy mouthfeel, a little bit more of a fruit, a little bit more of a malty taste because it's a single malt, whereas bourbon tends to have more spice, more oak, more barrel characteristic, sometimes a brighter fruit and a darker fruit. It just depends on the other grains going in there with the corn, and I'm comparing to single malt Scotch, by the way. But bourbon is typically going to have those punchier flavors than the Scotch. Now, for some people, that means Scotch tastes less harsh. However, I know some people, and this is actually more common than I thought it was, who they taste bourbon and they think it's smoother than Scotch. So, how can that be? Some people, bourbon to them is punchy enough for their palate, whereas Scotch is so mellow and so smooth that it's almost boring to them. And because it's boring to them, they only get the alcohol flavor. They notice the alcohol flavor a lot more. So this weird thing happens where it's a flavor that a lot of people would consider more mellow, but it tastes harsher because it tastes more like alcohol to those people. And I know people who are this way. So bourbon has enough punch to cover up that alcohol flavor and they don't really notice it, whereas Scotch does not. So it really depends on your palate. But in general, Scotch is going to have grainy, malty flavors. Sometimes reminds me of like a granola. Sometimes it'll have a fruity flavor, a vanilla flavor. I've had some that have like a coconut flavor. And then if it's peated, it's obviously very peaty, and there's a whole other thing going on with those flavors. Bourbon is going to have those barrel flavors. It's going to have that bit of punch, sometimes a little bit more of a black pepper, and also sometimes some fruitiness and different things like that. Caramel, vanilla, very common notes for bourbon. So two kind of very different flavors in a way, who those flavors for some people are more smooth. It's very subjective. It's more smooth to some people if it has that punchy bourbon note. It's more smooth to some people if it has that mellow Scotch approach that a lot of Scotches have. So that's a weird one to describe. Hopefully I articulated it properly. Okay, next question. Would you pay $239 for a bottle of Stagg Junior? No, I would not pay $239 for a bottle of Stagg Junior. I'm not big on overpaying for things because they're allocated. I don't know if you mean on the secondary market or if you mean it like an overpriced retailer. The most that I would probably pay, I almost paid $100 once, but then it wasn't $100. It was like, oh, it's $100 if you buy these other two giant bottles that are expensive. And yeah, I wasn't going to do that. So I didn't do it. But I would maybe pay $100 for Stagg Junior just because I don't own a bottle, so then I could get a bottle. I've tried it once, but I'd like to try it multiple times and actually form an opinion. So I'd maybe pay $100 for it once, but I wouldn't pay $239 for it. How do you acquire your allocated bourbon in Ohio? Line up early or store relationships? In Ohio, it is not exclusively, but it's mostly line up early. So on any normal day, you get your allocated bourbons by lining up at the store before they open. Sometimes Ohio does these like last minute drops where they'll email you and they'll be like, hey, get to a store now. And those are super cool. If Ohio, OHLQ, if you're watching this, I'm a fan. I like that. I missed the last one because I didn't see the email, but I still like it. At any rate, either you're doing that, you're doing a bottle lottery, or you're just standing in line. No store relationships in Ohio for the most part. There shouldn't be, and that's all I'm going to say about that. But yeah, that's how you're supposed to get your bourbon in Ohio. Infinity bottles, thoughts? I think infinity bottles are a lot of fun. They're a great way to finish off the rest of your whiskey in a bottle. So if you don't know what an infinity bottle is, it's a bottle that starts off empty. You put a little bit of a bunch of different whiskeys in it, and you just keep adding to it and drinking it at the same time. So not like all in one sitting, but like throughout years, you just have a glass of it, you throw a little bit in there, and it just lasts forever. So it's called an infinity bottle. Some people do these a few different ways. Sometimes they're trying to blend their own whiskey. Sometimes it's just every whiskey that you finish, you throw it in your infinity bottle when there's only a little bit left. That way you don't ever put a bottle away with a little bit left. Like we talked about earlier, they will go bad. So some people do it for that reason. I guess some people I think will do it when they open a bottle, like the first shot of every bottle will go into their infinity bottle. There's a bunch of different ways that you can do it, but I think they're fun. And there's a Whiskey Noobs infinity bottle that I haven't reviewed in a long time, and I need to. But I lost track of the shots in it, so I need to go back and try to make sure I put all the right stuff in it. Okay, next question. What big name whiskeys are worth paying the additional name surcharge? I don't know if there's any whiskey that's worth the name surcharge. So I'm assuming by that you meant, are there any that like have the brass to back up the big name? So like they have a big name, they cost more because they're a big name, but also they're just that good. I would say some of the Buffalo Trace bottles, if you're not paying secondary prices, and that second part is very important, if you're not paying secondary prices. But some of them do have the brass to back up some of the higher dollar amounts. I recently tried Midwinter Nights Dram. That's a higher end bottle, and I think it holds its own pretty well. But I guess it just got more expensive actually, so I don't know. Yeah, so in general though, I think you might be getting at like secondary pricing, and I think most of the time probably not. I probably just wouldn't pay secondary pricing the vast majority of the time. I'm between Bulleit and Maker's Mark. If price wasn't a problem, what would you choose? Ooh, that's tough. I think I would pick Bulleit over plain Maker's Mark, but I would pick Maker's Mark number 46 over Bulleit. So that's my answer to that. But Bulleit and normal Maker's Mark are closer together in price, and I would probably pick Bulleit personally. There's a lot of people who would pick Maker's Mark. There's a lot of people who are probably mad that I just said that right now, but that's just a personal thing. There's no like one of them being better than the other. That's just my opinion. Any thoughts on getting into distilling? Funny that I just mentioned that earlier. I would love to. I don't know if it's actually in the cards, but it's more like a dream type thing. I don't know. Like it's one of those things. If I broke it down logistically, would I actually want to? I don't know, but it sounds awesome. And I'm pretty involved in the industry, and it still sounds awesome. Is what I mean by that. Which would you prefer, Wild Turkey or Eagle Rare? If it's just 101, like Wild Turkey 101, that I actually, funny enough, have sitting right next to me, I would pick Eagle Rare. If it's Wild Turkey Rare Breed, I think I'd pick Rare Breed. But it depends, because Rare Breed is cask strength, so it depends on what I would be in the mood for. But most of the time, I'd probably pick Rare Breed. What are your thoughts on the whiskey cups that are made of wood? I see them advertised on TikTok as a tool to make whiskey smooth and enhance the flavor, etc. I have never had one. I've seen them. I believe they're called the Whiskey Grail. I've never had them. I don't know if it would make the whiskey smoother. I think smooth is something that gets thrown around a lot. It can be a useful word, especially if you're using it in a specific way. But I think in this case, it might be getting thrown around a little bit. That's not to say it doesn't improve the experience. I do think it's going to add some woodiness into it, and you're also going to smell that wood as you raise it to your mouth. I think that part of it might be more enjoyable, but I don't think it's going to magically make whiskey taste smoother. That's just my opinion. That's a guess based on my experience. If you buy a whiskey to try and absolutely hate it, what do you suggest to do with it? I've done this, so I mean, I got some whiskeys that I don't like. I typically keep them around. I'll try them again later on to make sure I don't like them. If I confirm that I don't like them, then I basically keep them to see if anybody who comes over wants to try them. And I've never done this, but if anybody, there's a couple that I'm really not a big fan of, where if somebody tried it and liked it, I would give it to them. I've never done that because there's only a couple that I don't like. But definitely keep them around for people to try, and also for cocktails. Sometimes if it's just like a specific note that you don't like, if you throw it in a cocktail, you don't really notice it so much. So usually I'm like a bleeding heart for whiskey. So If I don't like it, I'll try it again a month later, then I'll try it again 2 months later, and then I'll try it, and I'll just keep trying it and seeing if I like it, which I've done on this show before. I've tried it and not liked it and been like, I'm going to give it a fair shake. So I guess I'm a little bit of an optimist. If you buy a whiskey and oh wait, that's the question I just answered. So let's move on to the next one. What's the difference and history between U.S. proof, British proof, and ABV? I actually had to look this one up. So let's get this out of the way. ABV, first of all. Get that one out of the way because we're going to use that to describe the other two. ABV is alcohol by volume. It is the percentage of alcohol in the liquid by the volume of the liquid. What does that mean? That means if you've got something that's 50% ABV, then 50% of the liquid in that bottle is pure alcohol, like purely the substance that is alcohol. So if you were to somehow remove that alcohol, if you were somehow to take one of these bottles, I have a bottle right next to me, remove all the alcohol from it and leave behind the leftovers, if it was 50% ABV, you would cut the volume in half by doing that. That's what ABV means. And that's like the modern standard. That's like what everybody uses nowadays. But proof still gets used quite often. But I mean, a lot of times ABV is on almost every label. So that's what ABV means. Now, British proof, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is where proof got started. That's where it came from. And the reason that it was called proof is because you were proving that alcohol had a certain amount of alcohol in it. Like a spirit had a certain amount of alcohol in it. And so a 100 proof spirit, if I'm not mistaken, and this part I didn't just look up, but this is from memory, I think it would catch on fire when you would touch a flame to it. I think. And so that proof was 100 proof. That was like what they came up with. It was like, we're going to call it 100 proof, and that's the point where it becomes a proof spirit. So at 100 proof, at the time, I don't think they even knew percent ABV or knew how to measure it. How do I put this? 100 proof was just the measurement at the time. But later when we got percent ABV, we figured out that 100 proof is roughly 57% ABV. That is in British proof. I want to be very clear. That's in British proof, the proof that got all this started. Nowadays, so first of all, that's the conversion rate. It's 1.75 times your ABV is that British proof. And that's why it's that, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to say if I'm not mistaken a lot in this answer. Okay, but that's why. So then you've got your British proof. Well, now in the U.S., we started using the term proof, and it is different. It's different. So 100 proof in the U.S. means 50% ABV. The United States proof is literally just double the percent alcohol by volume. You take your ABV, you double it. That's the United States proof. And most of the time, 99.99999% of the time, at least in my life, that you hear somebody say proof, they're talking about that type of proof. The U.S. proof, that's just double the percent ABV. In the UK, they now use ABV most of the time. So there's not a lot of instances where you're going to see British proof that I'm aware of. Even scotches and things that I have, if they say proof, I don't even know if they do, but if they do, it's just double the percent ABV. So that's the norm nowadays. But the history of it had that 1.75 actually, which was fun. I looked that up and just learned it. So, I thought that was very interesting. I appreciate you asking that question. I just learned the 1.75 conversion rate. The history part of it I looked up before, and if I'm not mistaken, that's where it came from. All right. Oh, turns out that was our last question, and I didn't even realize it. So let's finish up this mystery whiskey tasting. It is one of these 4 bottles. I'm going to give you guys some notes, and then I'll read off the bottles one more time for the audio listeners, and then we'll be done for the day. Let's do this thing. Well, I will say this bourbon is even better than I remembered it, and I was already a fan of it, and I'm already a fan of most of the ones sitting up here. If you've been paying close attention to this episode, I just accidentally ruled out one of the 4. But I was already a fan of this, and I'm tasting it now, and I'm like, wow, that's even better than I remember. Now, what's going on with this is I'm going to get really specific, so lock in your guess now if you don't want more hints. It has a lot of flavor, a lot of body. There's a woodiness, a fruitiness, like I already mentioned. There's almost like a marshmallow or maybe like a chocolate, almost like a chocolate-covered marshmallow type flavor going on. A ton of body, a lot to love about it, but it has this little bit of a harshness, which is what makes it budget. Because if it didn't have that harshness, I think this would be a really good bourbon. It has this bitterness at the end. It leaves this little bit of a bitterness on your tongue. That really, for me, is what brings it down into that budget range, which is fine because I still think this is probably underpriced. I still think this is a great deal of a bourbon. And for those of you who haven't guessed yet and are listening to the audio version, we can choose from Smooth Ambler Contradiction, Maker's Mark, Evan Williams Bottled and Bond, and Wild Turkey 101. I will give you 2 Mississippis to lock in your answer. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. I am drinking Wild Turkey 101, which you might have guessed because if you've been listening long enough, you know I'm a fan of Wild Turkey 101. And yeah, I was already a fan of it, and having this glass, I'm like, wow, this is even better than I remember it being. So continually impressed by Wild Turkey 101 because that is like a $25 or $6 bottle of bourbon, if I'm not mistaken. Used to be $23 in Ohio, but I thought they raised the price. I could be wrong about that. Anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed that mystery whiskey tasting. It's kind of like a blind tasting. It gives you a little bit of practice with almost blind tasting. And hopefully you enjoyed this Q&A episode of Whiskey Noobs. A lot of fun things to come in the coming weeks because, as I mentioned, I'm back in action. I am back to regular recording schedule, and I'm really excited to get back to it. So thank you guys all for listening, and thank you for everybody who submitted your questions. Keep the questions coming, guys. These episodes are a ton of fun. I love them. I've mentioned it before. I love that I get to answer exactly what you guys want to hear. So keep the questions coming. I will leave you guys with learn to drink, drink to learn. Thank you guys for listening to another episode of Whiskey Noobs. If you need more Whiskey Noobs content in your life, make sure you check out our Patreon page in the show notes. And if you like the show, please make sure to leave a 5-star rating or review. It only takes a couple of minutes, and they're way more helpful than people realize. If you want to do tastings alongside the show, make sure you join the email list by sending an email to whiskeynoobspodcast@gmail.com with a subject line that says email list. You'll receive monthly emails with a list of the whiskeys that will be featured throughout the month so that you can buy them ahead of time. You can also find more Whiskey Noobs content on Instagram at @whiskey_noobs and on TikTok at Whiskey Noobs Podcast. Once again, thank you guys for listening. The Whiskey Noobs Podcast does not support underage or otherwise irresponsible consumption of alcohol.